The speaking of God at Sinai and the law he gave to Moses was full of thou shalt and thou shalt not. But the people didn't have the capacity to keep it. It merely exposed that there was something wrong with their nature, that it was not compatible with God. But God promised through the prophets that he would one day make a covenant, a new covenant, and he would write his laws on our hearts. Jeremiah said, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant I made with their fathers, but this shall be the covenant I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts." I love how he says, I will put their law in their inward parts. It's interesting that the tables of the law were called the tables of testimony in Exodus, and we have seen that the testimony of God is within us. The law was thou shalt not and thou shalt, but the testimony we have today is this is my son. He's the reality. The law was merely a shadow. The heart, the inward part on which God is writing, consists of our mind, will, emotions, and our conscience. This is where we experience the result of God's writing. Our hearts have been captivated by God, and more we see God and His purpose. Our life is framed in a new perspective. We're touched in a way that affects what we love and what we hate. Our will is impacted, and we have desires to come to God, be found in Him, and to manifest Him to others. Our conscience is affected, so that we are sensitive to sin and thankful for His forgiveness. This is all the result of the work of the Spirit in us writing on the tablet of our heart. This is something on a much higher level than having simply a list of rules. I may be able to follow a rule, but that may have nothing to do with who I am in my heart. God writes His law in our hearts and takes possession of our heart, making it His dwelling. Our personality begins to bear His signature. In Ezekiel, God gave another promise regarding His new covenant and the new way of dealing with His people from within them. He said, I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put in you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh, and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. This inward writing has changed us. We have a new heart. The new heart is still our heart, but the stone has been removed. Just as the stone was rolled away from the grave, the stone has been removed from our hearts. This is the issue of resurrection. Because of the risen Christ in us, the hardness toward God is gone. The Spirit has come to dwell, and God has written His law in our inward parts. As a result, we have new impulses, new desires, new affections, which cause us to walk in harmony with God. I'm going to step away from the notes again to say a qualifying word. I want to stress that the benefits of the new covenant in this life concerning our heart are not necessarily absolutes. We can have a divided heart. We can still go after the world, and we can still go after our flesh. And if we do that, it's the same as hardening our hearts. So even though the stone has been rolled away, we can kind of temporarily put the stone back if we don't keep coming to the Lord for grace. And that's what the book of Hebrews is about. It's about not shrinking back in fear or letting sin and condemnation cause us to be hardened in our heart towards God, but pressing through and having faith in the blood and the cleansing work of Christ that He did on the cross, and continually coming forward to the throne of grace and finding grace and receiving mercy, and making sure that our hearts are still soft and receiving His grace day after day. Then we will really enjoy the reality of what the new covenant provides, and will find in us a hunger for Him and a love for brothers and a new attitude towards grace. It doesn't mean that we won't sin. It doesn't mean that we won't still get annoyed with people around us, but we will continue to seek Him through it and gain Him through it. And that's the main thing. For all of our situations that are around us, God is just trying to gain our heart from Him so that He can write and work Christ into our being. That's more important than any great big work we do, or any success, or any even gospel preaching. Is God is after gaining us for Christ and working Christ into us. So thank the Lord that He's chosen such a comforting way to speak to us. He speaks to us through what seems like our own realizations concerning Him, and yet this speaking is not a small thing. Although it's gentle, subtle, and sweet, it's backed by the resurrection of Christ and is in fact how God is accomplishing his work of transforming and ultimately glorifying us. How many Christians are afraid that God has never spoken to them? We feel jealous because God spoke in such dramatic ways to the prophets in the Old Testament, but that speaking was inferior to what we have today. Surely the prophets would rather have what we enjoy as members of his household and family. We have God's testimony, his speaking within ourselves. This change in tone, which is sweet, has occurred because he is our Father, and the nature of his speaking in us is wonderful. His speaking is not, thou shalt and thou shalt not. It's, look, this is my Son, in whom I am well pleased. This is who he is and what he has accomplished, and this is what you are as a result. None of these things would be possible apart from the resurrection of Christ and the Spirit that we've received. This change in the terrifying tone of voice at Sinai to the sweet inward testifying of the Spirit of our Father produces the new atmosphere of Zion. It fills us all with the realization of who God is, and in this age we are full of expectation and confident hope of experiencing the glory of God. We become a rejoicing, joyful people, and Zion is being filled with songs of praise.